Now imagine for a moment having to undergo any of the following: your nails plucked out, being hung upside down, electrocuted in your private parts, stripped naked. These are just some of the 31 types of torture human rights groups allege are being employed by Indian security forces in the disputed region of Jammu and Kashmir. Located in the north of India, the entire state is claimed by both Pakistan and India. Long-running resentment against Indian rule led to a full-blown insurgency in the late 80s. That brought with it a heavy presence of Indian troops. Now, a report by two NGOs, the Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons and the Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society, says the government has been using torture against the local population indiscriminately since 1947, and that, for the most part, the abuses are going unpunished. Now, Professor Niels Melzer is the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, and he joins me now from Geneva. Professor Melzer, glad you could join us. Now, these allegations aren't new. These allegations of torture have been made against the Indian government before. Does this report change anything?
Well, I think the allegations that the report is making obviously are very, very serious and suggest that there might be very grave violations of the prohibition of torture. Now, I'm not in a position to assert the accuracy of all these allegations, but I unfortunately was not able to visit India myself, despite several requests to conduct an official visit.
What is it that the Indian government says every time you bring up this request that you want to visit India? And my understanding is that no UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has ever been able to visit India to verify any such claims.
Unfortunately, despite several requests and official requests submitted to the Indian government, I have not received any response so far.
Now, India is also a signatory to the United Nations Convention Against Torture, but it hasn't yet been ratified. Is there a way for the international community to pressure India to ratifying this convention so that India can be held accountable under this convention?
Well, the ratification of an international legal instrument really is in the sovereign decision of the concerned state. So no state can be forced to ratify a treaty. However, the prohibition of torture is not dependent on the ratification of any treaty because it is considered to be the fundamental customary human right, which is even peremptory, which means it cannot even be ignored or changed through a separate treaty. So it is one of the strongest customary human rights that is recognized universally.
One of the strongest customary human rights, as you put it, yet we keep getting report after report which accuses the Indian government of using torture in Jammu and Kashmir. How can change be brought about?
Well, obviously, this is not the only context where we receive, unfortunately, regular allegations of torture or ill treatment. The experience shows, however, that real change is always brought about from within the country, through public opinion, through public pressure, through reform in the institutions and in the policies of the state. It is also important to understand that torture is an ineffective tool of providing security or of finding the truth in criminal investigations. It really is a tool to break people, to intimidate people, that destroys not only the victim, but also the perpetrators, and in the end, dehumanizes even the society itself that tolerates such abuse.
So in a sense, torture is counterproductive, but states do not seem to understand that and yet persist with that practice.
Unfortunately, it takes a long time for the consciousness and the understanding to come through of how destructive torture really is. Again, I cannot assert to what exactly the facts are in India because I have not been able to investigate it myself.
Right.
I have received allegations myself as well.
Niels Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, thank you very much for speaking to DW News Asia.